understanding human decision making, and especially understanding the non-rational or the hidden and unconscious parts of how people make decisions. Because there's always a logical version of yourself that always does the right thing. They maximize their utility. They take into account all of the factors and make a very wise decision. Or there's the real version for most of us, which is the version that is a little bit more random, makes some mistakes, doesn't always do the optimal thing, but still is doing a decent job of getting through life. And my work is really about understanding that version of ourselves, which is the one that most of us spend most of our time being.
Welcome to Super Entrepreneurs Podcast. Today we have with us Leigh Caldwell. Leigh is a cognitive economist and founder of Irrational Agency. His work is about understanding the unconscious motivations of customers and how to transform those insights into effective marketing and sales tactics. Welcome to our show, Leigh.
Great to meet you, Shahid. It's lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's a great name, huh? Irrational.
Yeah, it's quite memorable. We came up with it about 11 years ago, and we realized as soon as we had the name, we thought we got to start a company now. It's too good a name to lose.
Very good. So are you, your background is psychology?
So my very original background is mathematics, and I started as a mathematician. I went into technology in the 90s and started a company around the early web development era of the dot-com boom. And then in the 2000s, I moved into behavioral science, psychology, and cognitive economics, which is this kind of group of disciplines that are all about understanding human decision making, and especially understanding the non-rational or the hidden and unconscious parts of how people make decisions. Because there's always a logical version of yourself that always does the right thing. They maximize their utility. They take into account all of the factors and make a very wise decision. Or there's the real version for most of us, which is the version that is a little bit more random, makes some mistakes, doesn't always do the optimal thing, but still is doing a decent job of getting through life. And my work is really about understanding that version of ourselves, which is the one that most of us spend most of our time being.
So it's the unconscious side of you,
Exactly.
the automatic. Yeah, we call it the logical mind. We call it the conscious mind, and then the more emotional, automatic, subconscious mind.
Yeah,
so
and sometimes the words that are used for that is system 1 and system 2. You might have heard this. So in
Yes.
the behavioral science world, system 1 is the automatic mind and system 2 is the logical mind. But actually, in my work, we also identify something called system 3, which is the more imaginative mind, the mind that you use for storytelling, the mind that you use to project a possible future self and to think, what could my life look like? And what that could be if I'm buying a product, what would this new flavor of ice cream taste like that I've never had before? I can't rely on logic. I can't rely on habit because I've never tasted it. So I have to imagine. And in a lot of decisions in life, we have to imagine what the outcome will be based on only partial clues from the past. And that's what we call system 3, which is so it's really a third dimension of the mind, not just conscious and unconscious, but also imaginative.
The imagination, one of the higher mental faculties. That's beautiful. Can you share with us or give us some kind of tips for business owners, entrepreneurs that they could do in their marketing to get a better picture of how to communicate their message in a way that could actually get them more clients, but at the same time to allow them to serve more people?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two big areas where I think you can do this as an entrepreneur. One of them is in the way that you communicate about your services. So very often, as entrepreneurs, we are focused on what we do, and that's what we call the functional aspect of our services. But what we don't always remember is, what will that make the customer's life look? And so if you can, instead of focusing on the fact that if you're a web designer, don't focus on the HTML skills or the fact that your websites are responsive and etc. Think about, what will that enable your clients? What life will that enable your clients to live? A life where they have more success and more freedom, a life where they have more ability to achieve their goals. And you can paint a picture, you can tell a story of the future life that they are living into. Now, you may not always know
with their product or service.
With your product, exactly. With your using your product or service as the pathway to get to that better future. Now, you might not always know what is it that person is looking for, what life do they want to have. So you need to speak to them, you need to get them to tell you stories, listen to the stories they tell, and find the emotions in those stories, find the dreams in those stories. And once you've listened to maybe, let's say, 10, 15 of your customers talking about the future life that they want, you'll start to recognize some patterns, and you can show them how your product can help them achieve those patterns. The other tip is in a completely different area, and that's actually pricing. So there's a lot of work you can do around the unconscious dimension of your pricing, so that you're not just selling based on cost, but you're selling based on the value that you create. You're making the comparisons again between your product and other products, or maybe you have 3 different options of your service that you can sell, and how you price those different levels taps into people's unconscious minds, and they will respond in quite a predictable way to price communication. I have a whole book on this called The Psychology of Price that gives you some of those tips of how to earn more money for what you do by using unconscious pricing approaches.
So you shift the perception, instead of trying to decrease your price or trying to play directly with the cost or the price of your product or service. You're seeing the behavior of the customers to see how they can get a better use value without touching the price or even elevating the price. But what's the use value? What's the perception? If they're coming in, if they're coming in, if they see the price and they see the value so much more.
Yeah. Everyone judges. So you're right. There's 2 separate things going on. One is that the value should be much higher than the price, of course, because people want to get more than they're paying for. So you focus on the value and showing people that. The other is that price is always evaluated relatively. So it's never a matter of, is $500 a high price or a low price, because it depends what it's compared to. It depends what it's for. If you can show that the alternative might cost $1,400, then $500 is a pretty good deal. If you can show that by buying this product, they can earn $10,000, then $500 is a no-brainer. But if you instead have your product at $500 sitting next to a competitor at $300, suddenly the $500 looks like an expensive option. Where it's compared to, where it sits alongside, shapes people's unconscious perception of if this is a good deal or not.
Yeah, but even at the 500, even if it was more than the 300, the 500 could do things that to make the 500 have a lot more value than the 300, if that makes sense. So meaning
absolutely,
they could add certain things.
That's where you need to focus on the differences.
Yeah, okay, that's wonderful. So when you go into a company, I believe you do some sort of an interview process, correct?
Yeah, so we will interview our own clients, but we also interview their customers. Typically, many of the companies we work with are so there's face-to-face interviews and there's surveys. There's both. So we might work with a company like PepsiCo or Clorox. Many of our customers are those bigger brands, so they're not all of them. And so we will then say, who drinks Pepsi? So we find the profile of the many people who drink Pepsi, and we find, say, 20 of them, and we'll interview them face to face. We'll talk to them about, tell me about when do you drink Pepsi? When do you drink other soft drinks? What does it say about you that if someone sees you with a can of Pepsi in your hand instead of Coke? What does it say? What if it's Pepsi Max versus regular Pepsi? What do those things mean? And we dig into the stories, and we get people to share something called story hearing. It's like the flip side of storytelling is story hearing. So we get them to tell us, what do you remember? What was the first thing you remember about ever having a can of soda when you were a kid? Was it like, did your parents not want you to have one, or was it something that was a special treat, or was it like your grandparents would give you one, or was it you would share with your friends? And all of those things, that experiences people have, they build up a meaning that this brand has, and that meaning in turn feeds into the future the brand promises you, so the future life that brand is offering you. And then we'll move on to surveys where we might bring in 1,000 people, and then we take them through a kind of online, almost like a game, like an online game where they step
market
through
research.
Precisely, yeah. So it's like a market research game, and they're going through a series of steps where maybe we offer them different choices. Maybe we'll show them some fictional soft drinks that they've never had before. We'll get them to talk about their experiences again, and to do word association. So what word is associated with Pepsi versus Coca-Cola? And all of that helps us dig into the unconscious understanding of how those people drink Pepsi and what Pepsi could do to appeal more to them and create a better emotional experience.
So Leigh, there is an art behind the questioning as well then, right?
Very much. There's an art and a science. So the science that sits behind this is called behavioral science. And within that, there are some areas like cognitive science and narrative psychology. And so there are specific techniques that have been tested in the scientific world by psychologists. There have been papers being published about it. And we use those techniques to explore the unconscious mind. But there is, of course, an art as well, which is designing the right kind of stories. So if I want you to tell me something from your memories about soda and soft drinks, I might need to ask the question in the right way. I might need to find the right prompt, the right way. I might tell you a story about me that encourages you to open up about yourself. So if I tell you that when I was a kid, we had a drink. I grew up in Scotland, and in Scotland we had this drink called Iron Brew. And Iron Brew is almost unheard of outside. They've started to export it a little recently, but it was really a very Scottish thing. It was almost a patriotic thing to drink Iron Brew instead of Coca-Cola or Pepsi. And but the problem was I really didn't like it. So I felt like my friends would be drinking this Scottish Iron Brew, and it was took a pride in it. And I just couldn't stand the flavor of it. And it really put me off soft drinks for ages until later in life, I started to drink more Coke or Diet Coke and realized, okay, I actually like this stuff, and I like caffeine. What's your story about soft drinks? And then maybe then you would open up and talk about what you remember and what, if there are brands that play an important role in your life.
Yeah. The questioning has to be designed in a way that you're getting the information from the unconscious, right? You're getting the answer of what the body is doing, what the automatic is, because that's where the purchasing happens.
Yeah, and so one of the things we say in behavioral science is that people make an emotional decision, and then they create rational reasons for that decision. So they've already decided, you know what, I'm going to have a Coke. But then they tell themselves, because it has the right amount of nutrients, it's because it's on a special offer. What? None of that is relevant. You would have bought it anyway.
Yeah. So it's that automatic behavior when they actually did that action, they took that action, but then the conscious mind comes in and tries to justify it, right?
Exactly.
But either way, they're going to get it.
Yeah. And some people, some scientists even think this is the whole reason that language evolved so we could persuade other people to do what we wanted them to do. So it wasn't about communicating. It wasn't about warning people. It was just because if you can get other people to go along with your plan, you're going to be a more successful person in the group or in the environment you're living in.
Yeah. Can you share some tips or strategies, for example, sales professionals going into a meeting? How could they articulate questions where they're getting more of the automatic responses?
I would say ask for a story. There's a couple of great books actually about storytelling in sales. The 7 stories every salesperson must know. That's a great one. And if you look for storytelling in sales, you'll find some more. But really, if you can get your customers or your prospects to open up and tell you a story about their life, then they are going to be primed to buy. They're going to reveal a lot more about who they are. They're going to reveal their motivations. And you might need to weave in your own story to get them started. You might need to not call it a story, but say, tell me about a case study of how you use this type of product, whatever it is that gets them comfortable in opening up. So that's the first step. But the second step is you have to really listen. So you need to be listening to the story they tell and think not just what are they telling you, but what are the reasons behind their actions. So if they tell you a story about when they bought I don't know, last time they built a website and how the person screwed it up or whatever it might be, then think about what sits behind. Why did they choose that supplier? Why did they stay with that supplier even though they screwed it up? Why have they not replaced the website yet? Are they burned? Have they been almost traumatized by the bad experience? So they're just, even though it's bad, I don't want it to
dig deeper.
I can't face it again. So listen hard for what they're not saying, but they're revealing in their body language or in what sits behind their words.
Yes. Can you share some help with finding out a prospect or potential client's want?
Once again, if you're face to face with them, then the stories will often reveal what people want. If you look at the fairy tales that we all learned as kids and the different cultures that we might come from, we all have different stories, but every one of those people have wants in the stories. Every character, they have a motivation, they have an objective, they have a goal, and those are woven together. Those are what drive the story. So if you listen to that person's story about what the last website they bought or the last soda they drank, there's going to be some wants that sit under there, and you can dig into that. Once they've told the story, you can drill in and ask them. So tell me a little more about why you needed a new website, why you wanted a new website. There'll be a surface answer, and then you can drill in and ask more. Do you know the rule of the 5 whys? So the 5 whys is something that Toyota used as a problem-solving technique in their factories. If something went wrong, like this, a car didn't get built to the right level of quality, they would ask, did that happen? And the answer might be the paint gun failed, blocked. So then you say, why did that happen? Paint gun blocked because there wasn't enough oil in it. Why wasn't there enough oil? The person hadn't checked last week, etc. So you go to the 5th level, and you could do the same when you're speaking to a client. You could say, okay, so you say you bought this website because you wanted to have more leads coming into your business, but why did you need that? Why did you want more leads? Why were there not enough leads from your other sources? And you drill in like that. If you're using some of these online survey techniques, there are other ways to drill into motivation. So there are ways that you can use. We can, for example, show people images on screen. They have to classify the images, or they have to respond or choose something, solve a puzzle. But you can tell from how quickly they solve the puzzle, or which images they first choose, or which words they first choose from the association. That unconsciously tells you something about their motivations. And so those are the more advanced techniques that we might use if we're building an online survey for a client. But what you can do yourself is really all about getting those stories and understanding the drivers behind the stories.
There was a really good point that you made. The stories are actually built upon the want. It's such a simple thing, but it is probably missed because you're getting the story here. But if you really pay attention, if you exclusively listen, you could see where the driver is, and that driver, you'll find out what is it that they want. So that's amazing.
Yeah. And this is, if you're writing a story, and I write sometimes fiction as well, one of the key things is every character has to have a motivation. You have to figure out, what does this character want in the whole story, but also from this individual scene, even from this conversation, what are they trying to get with this line of dialogue that they're saying? And this is actually used as a way of training actors. That there's an acting school that's about actioning, as by, I think, Michael Chekhov is one of the people. It comes out of the Stanislavski actor training, and the actors are told what does your character want to get from the other person by saying this line? What do they want? And that will tell you how to say the line, how to deliver it. So if it's used by actors to make movies and TV more convincing, then it can be used by a salesperson too. It can be used by an entrepreneur.
Can you give us a quick example of that?
So I think just from the TV world, you might have
like a specific example in that.
Yeah. So let me think of a scene from a film. So I know, let's say Breaking Bad. So I watched through all of Breaking Bad recently during the lockdown. And there's so many conversations between Walt and Skylar, his wife, and they're talking about something. They're talking about like the house, or keeping the house tidy, or the fact that Walt's out all the time, or the fact that something about their kids. And it gets into this, like they're complaining at each other. They don't get on very well. But every line that they're delivering, it's about getting power. It's about getting freedom from the other person. So they each are saying the line because they want to have a bit more influence over how their family is going to go. And every single line that might be, did you bring in the takeout, or are you gonna take the kid to school today? What sits behind that line is Skylar saying, I don't like the fact that you're abandoning this family. I want to pull you back. Or it's Walt saying, I feel pressured and controlled. I want to get out. And they don't say that, but that's what the subtext is. And if you're talking to a customer, that customer says, yeah, I'm happy enough with my website. I don't need a new one. Maybe what they're really saying is, I'm so busy, I can't face the idea of taking on yet one more task that I have to deal with. And so I just don't want to deal with you. And if you could take that load off them, reassure them that, you know what, if I build your website, you don't need to do anything. I'll take care of it. I understand your business enough. I can create it. All you need to do is look at it, tell me what you like and don't like. I'll handle the rest. It's one load off your back. Maybe that would be a way to sell your website services, by understanding what the person's really saying when they talk to you.
What are they really saying? It's been great speaking to you, Leigh. The information has been worth a lot of value, and hopefully it can help people. Can you share with us what you feel your innermost superpower is that got you to this point in life?
I'm going to go back to mathematics. I love analyzing the hidden patterns beneath things. And this is what mathematics is all about, is finding the patterns, finding the regularities and the formula or the relationship between different objects, and the being able to look through the noise, filter through it, and find the core, like the essence that is sitting there. To me, that's a superpower. And I hope that I've been able to do a little bit of that today.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for taking the time to come on our show. It was great talking to you, my friend. I love this stuff. At the end of the day, by incorporating this type of skills or knowledge into your business, you are actually providing a way to help more people, because now you're finding ways to speak to them where they actually are, not the one that they're displaying, but who they really are. So if you can give this side a little break, and you could penetrate that area, at the end of the day, you are more of a service to that person that they even know.
I absolutely agree. I think the more you understand people, the better you can give them what they really need and help them recognize what they really need. They might not always know.
Yeah. Thank you, Leigh. And audience, thank you for joining us for another episode. Leigh's information will be in the show notes. As always, take a look at their work, what they're doing. If you need help, get in touch. Appreciate you guys.